Welcome back to Home Improvement Woodworking. Are you looking to build a simple wall-hung cabinet? Well, I've got a solution for you. I'm going to show you two examples. This is a very complex cabinet, but I want to empower you to be able to, with limited tools and limited experience, be able to build a wall cabinet. I've got a very simple one to start with. We'll get into a little bit more complex one in the second one, but this will give you two options so you can learn how to be successful at a project like this. Stay tuned, I'll show you how it's done.
Our videos show you how to add value and character to your home.
This is the centerpiece of the room, so it really needs to visually work.
Learn how to get quality results that you'll be proud of. Welcome to Home Improvement Woodworking.
This whole space is a disaster. It needs some organization, so I'm building a cabinet here above the drill press. I'm building a cabinet in the center and a cabinet on the right hand side here to hold some organizing space. It's going to make this much cleaner and much more organized. I've measured all my toolboxes here so I know the size and dimensions I need to make this cabinet on the left. I've measured out these boxes here so I know what to plan for on the box on the right, and the center cabinet is that big cabinet that allows me to get my binders and manuals out of the way. This is something that allows me to also work on the next step, and that's laying out how many sheets of plywood I need. So I drew out a 4x8 sheet of plywood, I drew out the parts, and that tells me how much I need. Unfortunately right now it's difficult to buy plywood during the pandemic. I was able to get some 1/4 inch maple, but I wasn't able to get 3/4 inch. I've got some inventory here, a mix of cherry and maple, so these cabinets are going to be a little bit varied, but I'm using both maple and cherry in this cabinet, so I think it's going to work for the workshop. If you have limited tools, you might want to consider having a lumberyard cut down the material for you. I've got a whole video on how to cut down large material. I'll leave a link in the video description. Once I cut the plywood to width, I then measure them and cut them to length on the miter saw. For the smaller parts, I cut them on the table saw and we're all set to go. I've got all the parts cut here, and this is the simplest upper cabinet you could ever build. It's got two sides, a top and a bottom, and a back, and it's got two nailer strips, and I'll explain those in a minute. But these pieces are just going together with screws and a little bit of glue for extra insurance. So let's get started. Now there are two things I need to do before I'm ready to assemble this. The first one is I need to cover the edge here with edge banding. That's just a thin veneer with heat activated glue on the back, and that gives me a finished look on the board. The second is for drilling these screws in here, I want them to be countersunk, which means they're going into the wood. And in order to do that, you use a countersink. This is one of three styles that I have. This one has a depth stop, so it automatically stops at the right depth. There's two others here. These ones you just gauge how deep you want them to go. But the difference between these ones is this one has 4 cutter heads, so it cuts much faster. This one has a single cutter head, so this would be your budget type of countersink. I've set the depth of the drill bit here, so it's almost to the point of the screw, not quite there. And then what I need to do is, on this one, I can set how deep I want that. If I'm putting a plug in, I might want more of a reveal like that, but I'm not doing that, so I'm going to set it just a little more than being flush. Tighten that up, and we're all set to go. Now get out the edge banding. Unfortunately, I thought I had cherry plywood. Turns out it's mahogany, so my edge banding on this cabinet is going to have cherry on it. And it's pretty easy stuff to put on. You just need a regular clothes iron with no steam on it. You just want to get a piece long enough to cover the board. Oops, I want it this way. And then you're going to iron it on. I find it easiest to put this in the vise, and then the board's not moving around on me. So I've got my iron hot here. I'll put this in the vise, and I don't want this masking tape on here. So all you need to do is center it on here and then iron it on. You want to make sure that it stays centered, And what you're doing is you're heating up that glue and it's allowing it to bond. So you want to put a little bit of pressure on as you're going. And then what I like to do is just give it an extra push with a block of wood, just to make sure that it's well adhered. So it's as simple as that. I'm going to trim it off in a minute. I just need to let that cool. So we'll do the next one here and just move along and get them all edge banded. Once the glue's cold, you can trim it. That means it's good and solid. So just put it back in the vise here. And what you want to use is an edge band trimmer. You can file that down, sand it down. It's going to take you a while. But this has 2 cutter blades in it and it's spring activated. So all you need to do is put it on and squeeze it in the direction the cutters go. And what it does is it trims off those edges. So that's the first step. The second step is trimming off the ends. So I just take a scrap piece of plywood and a sharp knife, run the knife underneath, and trim off the edge. So then you just take some 120 sandpaper and sand it down until it's nice and smooth, and you're good to go. I'll leave a link to this trimmer in the video description.
Please give us a thumbs up so more people will see our videos.
With the edge banding all done, we're ready to go. Now it's easiest to assemble one of these with 2 people, but if you don't have a second set of hands, I recommend getting some of these clamping squares. Some of these clamps make it much easier. I put some blocks here just to elevate the piece. So we'll start with one side here, and we'll put the bottom on here, and then the clamping square goes on. So you can just get it into roughly the right place that you want to put the screws in, and then you can adjust it from there. So that's exactly where I want it. I can now stand this up and screw in this side and then line up the other part to get it exactly where I want it. Now, as I mentioned before, I want to put some glue on this, which actually makes this more slippery, which is another reason these squares are so important when you're working alone. So all I'm going to do is add a bead of glue. Now this won't make it a rock hard piece because you're gluing to the veneer surface, but what it does is just gives a little bit more tack. And I'm going to be putting some heavy stuff in here, so I want it to be nice and strong. So we'll line that up again. Clamp it on, and then we're ready to drill and screw. I'll do it this way. So what you want to do is drill right in the center of this board. You want to come down at least an inch, so you're not going to risk splitting that plywood. And I'm using 1 3/4 inch screws, so I get 1 inch into this part here. So now I can turn that around, do the same thing on the other side. Now this one, depending on how you're working, you might not need one, but I'll put it on just for insurance, just makes it easier. And then drive a screw through this way. So you can see how quickly this goes. Just a matter of driving 3 screws in and you're good to go. So I'm going to do the same thing with the top. Lay it out here and then we'll work on putting the second side on. And you might wonder why I use an artist brush when spreading this instead of my finger. One is it's less messy, but 2, it gives you no contamination of your oils from your skin getting in that glue and weakening the glue. Putting on the second side is much easier. Just applying the glue, position it, and put the screws in. So now I have the basic box, and it does have just a slight movement to it, but those screws are holding it in secure. What you need to do to make sure that your cabinet isn't going to rack, which means twisting this way, is to put a back on it. So that's what I've got here. This is 1/4 inch, and I'm using maple for this, and I've cut this to size so we can just nail that on. Now the nails that I'm using for this project are small flathead nails, and you can see this organization and how I organize my shop in a video about small parts organization. There's a link to that in the video description. Now before I nail this on, I just want to make sure the cabinet is square. It should be, but if you just measure from one corner to the other, here I've got 25 7/8, and here I've got 25 7/8. Because we've got such a large connection here that's solid, generally these come out square. So I just need to apply some glue, and then we'll put the nails in, and we've got the back on. Now the back isn't strong enough to actually hold this cabinet on the wall, and that's what the nailers are for, and that's the next step. So let me just spread this glue. We'll get this attached. Okay, we're good to go. Now, the cabinet is secured to the studs of the wall, but that thin back isn't strong enough to hold this cabinet up, especially with all the weight I'm going to put in it. So you need to add something called a nailer. This is 3.5 inches. It goes in at the back here, and what I'm going to do is screw it in from the sides and the bottom. I've got another one for the top, and that way I've got a secure way to attach this cabinet to the wall. With the nailers ready for screwing in, I just need to measure to make sure I'm getting them exactly in the center of the nailer. So I just measure 1 inch in to give me an idea of where I need to eyeball center. And then if I do 4 1/4, that just tells me where the top of the nailer is. So I can now put 2 screws in here and make sure they're dead on. Now for additional security, what I like to do is tag 2 more screws in up here, and that just prevents that plywood from wanting to bend out and not being connected to the cabinet. So there you go. This is the easiest wall cabinet to build. Now if you want to get into something that's a little more complex and hide the nailers, you can put the panel in front of that, but what you need to do is run a shallow dado all the way around on a table saw. You can use just a regular table saw blade, and I'll show you how that's done in a minute. But this is a cabinet that's going to work well for me. It's nice and strong, and it's going to allow me to store all my cases and get them out of the way up on the wall. Now, there are more complex ways to build cabinets. You can put rabbets in here, you can dado in shelves, but I wanted to share with you the easiest way to build one of these. So if you're building your very first cabinet, you can be successful at a project like this. So let's move on now to the more complex one, and you can see how I build that. This cabinet has the similar parts as the last one, so a top and bottom, 2 sides, and the nailers. The back is going to slide into it, and I'm also putting in an adjustable shelf, and I've got a jig for that. This allows me to drill the holes, so I've got an adjustable shelf that will be on pins. So you get to see that as well. The first step is to cut these and put the dado in so I can slide the back in where I need it. I set the table saw blade to 1/4 inch, that's 1/3 of the way into the material. Then I use the nailer to set the distance between the saw blade and the fence. That sets the distance at the back of the cabinet. Then I run all the material through the saw once, and then readjust the fence so I get the width of the plywood, and then run everything through a second time. So here you can see how this plywood back is going to go in, and then the nailer is going to go behind that. It'll be concealed, so it gives the same structure, but you'll never know it's there. On the maple plywood, I've got maple edge banding. I'll just go through the same process here and prepare the surfaces. Before I assemble the cabinet, what I want to do is drill for the shelf pins. It's just much easier to do it that way. And what you need to do is make sure you've got your sides oriented so you have the holes drilled from the same reference point. So I've got my right side, my left side, and I've marked the bottom corner here. The shelf pin jig is fairly easy. It's got an edge on it here that just lines up. I line it up at the bottom, and it's got this drill bit that goes into each of the holes, and as you push it through, the drill bit comes out. So it's a really cool setup. It makes it really fast for drilling these shelf pins. The assembly of this cabinet starts off the exact same as the first one. Putting on the bottom, putting on the top, and we're ready for the next step. And before I can put this other side on, what I need to do is slide in the back. So it just goes in the slots here. And then this will go on top. Just need to add a bit of glue first. Just need to work the back into that dado, and then it comes together. Now I can turn this around, and this is where the nailers go. There's one here for the top, one here for the bottom. Screw that in from this side and all the way around here, and you'll never know those nailers are there, but this is key for the structure for hanging the cabinet. So we can now test out the shelf, put in the adjustable pins, and I prefer pins that have support on the sides and the bottom rather than just a straight pin coming out. It provides a stronger shelf in the end. The shelf is about 1/8 of an inch narrower than the cabinet, and that provides a nice snug fit. If you want to conceal the screws on the side of the cabinet, what you can do is add a veneer. You can see that in my next video on how to build a cabinet for small part storage boxes. The last thing to do before mounting this on the wall is to put a finish on. And if you're new to finishing, I've got a video on beginner finishing recommendations. I'll put a link in the video description below. This is part of an organization series we're doing for workshops, how to maximize the space in your workshop so it's not only organized but it's functional and makes you more productive when you're in there. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you do, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to subscribe to our channel, you can click over here, click on that bell icon, and you get notified every time we publish a video. Until next time, enjoy your time in the workshop.